Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, the plain and simple study of the entire Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in 1 Kings chapter 2, and we're going to be, chapter 2 is David's, the passing over, the transferring over of the kingdom from David to Solomon. This is David's last words, his actual last words. You can even say that they are his deathbed words. And I'm doing this a little different. I'm doing this without a camera. So bear with me on that, or at least maybe you don't have to see my mug. That may be a good thing. But anyway, so we'll get back to the camera soon. But anyway, I'm doing this without a camera. So anyway, we're moving along. As I said, 1st and 2nd Kings. And remember, these books were initially written as one book. So, and translators divided them up. Why? I don't know. But it doesn't matter. In that, whether we have it or not, doesn't matter. But it does. It takes us to 1st and 2nd Kings, and then 1st and 2nd Chronicles have different perspectives. One from Chronicles from the southern kingdom, Judah, and then Kings from the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes. So you had Judah and Benjamin with the southern kingdoms, and then the northern 10 tribes, or sons of Israel, descendants of Israel. Right now, this is one nation. And we will see the split of the nation where it becomes two divided nations, where the civil war, actually not a civil war, but where they split, where they break off. Right now, Solomon is about to take possession of the kingdom, and he will rule for 40 years as David ruled for 40 years. And the difference with Solomon is his kingdom, his rulership will be during a time of peace. And that's going to be an interesting perspective. David was a man of war, and because of that, he could not build the temple. God said, you're not going to build the temple. It is interesting when you have a kingdom that enjoys peace. And we're kind of going to see in that respect how spoiled Solomon was. But with this is the, again, last words of David. Now remember, his brother Adonijah tried to take over the kingdom, sensing that his father was in his last days. He decided he was going to make a run and take over the kingdom, which David quickly squashed. So one of David's last acts of king was to squash Adonijah's attempt. And one of the things we're going to see is David instructing Solomon, passing some wisdom on. And let me just say this. This was, if you go back and you remember, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but if you go back and remember in, I think it's chapter 27 of 2 Samuel, where there was a famine in the world, in the land. And David inquired of the Lord and said, why do we have this famine? And he said it was due to some sins that King Saul had done, some wrong. And David had to make that right. And one of the things we're going to see here is David instructing Solomon how to tidy up these things. Excuse me. And it's going to be interesting that in a sense he's going to say, hey, reading between the lines here, don't make the mistakes that I made, or I don't know if David even knew about it, but at least he's going to say, look, don't bring the baggage from my kingdom or my rulership over into your kingdomship. There were some wrongs that he's going to instruct David in doing. Solomon into doing. And I did not transfer over like I said I was going to. What the freak? All right. Let's bring this in here. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 2, it says, as the time approached for David to die, he instructed his son Solomon. Now, one thing I also want to say is, and this is just kind of a question, we're going to see that it said David reigns for 40 years. And I don't know particularly if that's figuratively or in exact years. The reason why I'm thinking about this is because David would have been only 70 years old. He reigned for 40 years. He was 30 years old when he assumed the throne, and he reigned for 40 years. That would have made him 30 years. Now sometimes, so there's two things right here. It's kind of hard for me to believe that David was, in a sense, this old and kind of weak just at 70. It's possible. But also sometimes too, when we speak, and the Bible is full of kind of language like this, that is giving you the general sense. So when it says that David was 40, it's the general sense. It's general rule of 40. Now, the details could be, David could be a lot older right now. It could be a lot, and again, I wouldn't debate over it, but just an observation at this point. Verse 2, as for me, I'm going the way of all the earth. Be strong and be courageous like a man. Now, I want to say one other thing. This is, would to God that our leaders would follow this example. Now, what do I mean? I have seen many pastors pass away and not give wise counsel or wise instruction. I've seen them pass away and then kind of leave their churches in shambles. And this is a sidebar here, but this instruction here, I think, is wise. I think it's paramount, and would to God many leaders would do the same. All right. So, and also not only leaders but parents, right? As they are passing away, pass on, wisdom, counsel before they leave. And you see David doing this. Now, verse 2, as for me, I'm going the way of all the earth. Be strong and be courageous like a man. Now, one other thing about this statement here when he says like a man, we'll see this probably in the Chronicles, but David really thought that Solomon wasn't cut out for the job. I mean, he really thought, Solomon, it seems that Solomon, at least this is how David kind of treats Solomon, that he's kind of like a mama's boy. David was a man's man. Solomon, he was a lover, right? And you see this kind of in this statement right here. And he says, be strong and be courageous like a man. And we'll see this later on because David actually says that. We're not going to kind of see it here, but David provides for the building of the temple because he kind of really didn't think Solomon was up to the job. Verse 3, and keep your obligations to the Lord your God, and walk in his ways, and to keep his statutes, commands, ordinances, and decrees. This is written in the law of Moses, so that you will have success in everything you do and wherever you turn. Good counsel, good exhortation here. Verse 4, and so that the Lord will carry out his promises that he made to me, if your sons are careful to walk faithfully before me with their whole heart, with their whole mind and heart, you will never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. Now, we're going to see how he will not really be this faithful to the Lord. We'll see this later on. Verse 4, he says, now this is his correction. Now, this is what he's going to say. Hey, don't tie up these loose ends. Verse 5, you also know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He murdered them in a time of peace to avenge blood shed in war. He spilled the blood on his own waistband and on the sandals of his feet. Now, I don't know why he is written this way, because remember, Zeruiah is his sister, and Joab, as well as his brothers, and then Amasa, these are his nephews. So Amasa's mother is actually, of one of his sisters. And of course, Zeruiah, she produced three of the baddest dudes that ever lived. David's 30 mighty warriors. But Joab was a very wicked person, and really David couldn't handle him. One of the reasons is that, too, David said that anyone who conquers Jerusalem would be commander over his army. Joab did that, but Joab also would have seized command of the army. Joab was a very interesting person in that he kind of reminds me, when I think of Joab, I think of a person like J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. If you ever go back and do a kind of a history of the FBI, which J. Edgar Hoover ran it for like over 50 years. And he didn't have aspirations of being president or senator or anything else. But you couldn't touch him. He had files, right? Well, Joab had military might, and he didn't have aspirations of being king or anything like that. But David, he was going to be commander of the military army, and he was faithful to David. He was faithful to the kingdom until the incident of Adonijah. And they all thought David was going to kill over. That's why they did that. So it was a poor move. Now David is basically saying to Solomon, take care of him, because he spilled some blood. And as I said, if you go back and remember how God held David's generation responsible for Saul's murder. This counsel here is, hey, you don't want what Joab did by murdering Amasa and Abner. Okay. And by the way, he did it not because he did it out of revenge. No, he murdered Abner out of revenge. Now, what is interesting about this, from a strategic standpoint, it was good that he did that, because as we even see years later, and I'm going to get to him in a moment, there were people who never ever thought David was the rightful king. Chiefly his family members, right? Some of his family members. So it was good that he rooted out this, but Abner had David, in a sense, who was trying to make peace in the case of Abner. it really was making a foolish decision. Now, if you gotta go back, David, and thank God for God's grace and mercy, because David sometimes had made some foolish decision that had God not intervened. So you could, in a sense, say despite David, not because of him. Like when right before when God was removing Saul from office, and remember David was almost going to fight on the Philistine side, and so how disastrous that would have been for David. So, and yet the same thing here. He was actually going to make a covenant with Abner. Actually, I'm sorry, he actually did make an agreement with Abner. And the idea was to bring all of Israel together. But Abner was a shrewd man. And Abner would have wielded power much like Joab did. The difference between Abner and Joab had no aspirations beyond, beyond just, commanding the armies. But Abner did. Abner was the power behind. And if you go back to Saul's son, he was the power behind that. And when Saul's son, if you think about it, accused Abner of sleeping with his concubines, okay, then, and I'm glad I brought that up, because I'm going to show you the power of that. We're going to see the power of that. But when Saul's son, who was ruling the northern kingdoms, right? David was ruling Judah and Benjamin, and then Saul's son was ruling. Excuse me. He was ruling the northern kingdoms. Now, I say that because we're going to get back to see. Just with this generation, we're going to go back to that split. And I only say that only because just to kind of, oh, where am I at here? But anyway, so Abner, had he got into the kingdom, okay, if he had gotten his way, he would have tried to manipulate David. He would have tried to be the power behind David. And he would have had a lot of influence, because think about it. He was bringing the northern kingdoms together. Okay? He was bringing the northern kingdoms, and he did that only because he was mad. Okay? He was mad at Saul's son. That's why. And he didn't like him. Saul's son was sort of weak. And here you had Abner, by the way, who was Saul's uncle. Again, he was the power behind that. And that wouldn't have been good for David's kingdom. And so, and again, sometimes what I'm saying is that these things here, God works, he uses these things to work out his will. All right, so he's telling now Solomon, hey, make sure you do not you. By the way, and it's kind of a weasel way out too. David he was always thinking in a sense from a kingdom perspective, and so had he dealt with Joab, Joab could have caused him a lot of trouble. Now he's going to tell Solomon, "Not you deal with it." Okay, look, I'm going to pick this up in the next study here, and we'll pick this up because this chapter here, this actually transfer has some good stuff here. Anyway, um, I'll pick it up in right up here in verse 5 again, um, and then we'll see y'all at the next time. Don't forget to like and share this video, guys. Hit that subscribe button. All right, I'll see you next time.